here to talk about competing in an unpredictable world, or as I call it, welcome to the future. As every publisher retools and reimagines their business, a few fundamental questions must be asked, and they must be answered. And I'm really happy to say that Michael Jensen did all my work for me yesterday. And the only thing is I have a few questions that, just due to the technological advances, he didn't quite address. However, we're going to repeat some of the things he did. First, of course, is what is a book? Seems like an easy question to answer, and 5 years ago it was. I think we could all picture a book in our head. Today we can't do that. And we're changing our definition of a book every day, and I've actually had people ask me, what do we call these things that are emerging? And I have absolutely no clue. I still call them books, but I still call things records. So, I'm not necessarily the best person for this. But is a book a finished, finite thing? Is it a living thing? Is it a multimedia, multi-platform? What do you call this thing? And while I'm sure a new vocabulary will emerge over time, it leads me to wonder about the differences between what publishers do and what other entertainment media does, and how do we decide what the line between these two things are? It also leads to another question. What is a publisher? Again, 5 years ago, we all knew the answer to this one. Today, it's not such an easy question to answer. This room is filled with all sorts of publishers. Everybody has a vision of publisher in their head, but if I asked 5 people what a publisher is or what they do, and they'll tell me what they do, and it has nothing to do with binding books and printing books and distributing books and shipping books and marketing books as we knew books to be 5 years ago. And so it leads me to also ask, who is your competition? Because publishers, there used to be the big 6 and then a whole boatload of indies and then some self-publishers, and we all knew what they were. But it depends on the business you're in and the business you want to be in when you ask who your competition is. Your competition is motion pictures, it's games, funny pictures of cats. It's websites that cover current events in depth. It's Twitter. It's a person who posts step-by-step instructions for something that you've published a book and made that just a tiny section of your book. Why would they want your book when they just want that little chunk of information? So your competition is everywhere. And it's also publishing ventures that do things faster. Where I think you're all familiar with Byliner. Byliner gets a book out very, very quickly, or they get a long-form journalism piece out very quickly. They're not waiting until the 2012 spring catalog. They're certainly not looking at 2013 and saying, well, we can slot that in 2013. They have this thing out within a month. And that's serious competition, particularly for nonfiction. And I'm really starting to wonder how soon we see people competing with their nonfiction books in a serious way where it takes a big chunk of revenue. And competition is not just Amazon and Kobo, who announced yesterday that they're now publishers. Kobo did, Amazon we knew about, obviously. Agents are very aggressive about getting into this space. They're mostly exploiting backlists right now, but some agents are looking at original works. And agents have sort of an advantage over traditional publishers in that they're coming in with a lot lower overhead, they're coming in with less baggage, and they're certainly coming in with fewer preconceived notions of what it means to be a publisher. So the competition is changing constantly, and that means publishers need to constantly evaluate their competitors. And this is a really interesting question to me because, like I said, I'm sticking with 5 years ago because I kind of feel like that was the beginning of whatever point we're in now began. But we kind of knew what it looked like 5 years ago. Independent booksellers came and went. Big box stores were around, except for Borders was always sort of, what's going on with Borders? We're not quite sure. And, today, indies come and go. The big box stores have changed a little bit, and we have now virtual boxes instead of physical spaces. And Borders, we've solved that problem more or less, unless you're in the finance department of publishers. And along the way, something really happened, and I think that this has been the worst thing ever for my credit card, is that the bookstore changed. I am going to just underestimate a number, but there are probably 200-something bookstores in this room alone. And that's a really powerful thing for a reader. I know it's a little bit scary and it changes dynamics a lot for traditional publishers, but the fact that people can buy and read books at any point in time. The fact that people are sitting in the audience and have purchased books as people have been presenting is an amazing thing for readers, and there's great opportunity for publishers. But it also leads to the biggest question, at least for me, and the hardest one for me to answer is, who are your customers? Because the next question is, whose customers are your customers? Publishing has not traditionally been a direct-to-consumer business, and I'm not entirely sure that that is the kind of business most publishers should be in. But there is a sense that they have to engage with readers. The problem is the bigger retailers are owning those customers, and they're not going to give up that data. We can pretend that Amazon might share their consumer data, not feeling it, but things happen. And so I kind of think you've already figured out where I'm going with this, but I'm going to be really super obvious about it. It's the end of the world as we know it. And I don't know if people feel fine. I actually kind of like it because I like change. It's sort of exciting for me. But every aspect of the publishing business is changing, and it's kind of thrilling, it's scary, and it's the biggest thing to face. Right now, we're in the biggest upheaval in publishing since your absolute favorite touchstone of the biggest thing in publishing. Take the Gutenberg press, take the invention of traditional publishing, take the mass market paperback. All of these things are milestones, but I think right now we're seeing the biggest shift, and we're going to be living with this shift for at least the rest of my lifetime and the lifetime of my niece, and she's 5 months old, so it gives you a sense. So how do you prepare for the future? And I think the first thing is obvious. Don't panic. There are lots and lots of challenges facing publishing, but there are so many amazing opportunities, and change is the new normal. And so why not embrace it? Just accept that this is what it's going to be like and go with it. Expect that things are going to be different. From the perspective of readers, ebooks are something new, but the web and what the web can do is kind of old hat. We really understand what the web does and how to use it and how to find information. And so right now, these ebooks are very kind of, oh, this is really kind of cool. Look, I can read a book on this device. But readers are going to start saying to you, okay, well, why can't you be more like the web? Why do I have to interact? Why do I have to buy a whole book when I want a chunk of information? Why do I need to actually go to this separate application when it makes more sense as a website? So as readers become more sophisticated, they're going to become more demanding on publishers. I think one of the most current challenges for publishing is how to be ahead of the readers, how to kind of give them what they want before they realize they want it, to badly quote other smarter people. Publishers have to look for new business models, new ways to tell stories, and when I say stories, I'm not just talking about literary fiction or fiction in general. I'm talking about everything that we do in publishing is a story. And however that story is told, we need to be looking at new ways to tell those stories and ways that make sense to the readers. And I'm going to harp on this for the rest of my life, probably. And part of not panicking is avoiding the temptation to jump on every new shiny. It's okay to take your time to sit back and say, how does this fit into my business? I'm going to steal from Michael again, but does it match your mission? If it doesn't match what you do, if it doesn't make sense for your business, then set it aside. If it really is right for your business, it's probably going to still be there in a year. 2 years from now, it will make sense. So don't just do it right. Rewire. Rewiring your business is going to be the toughest challenge any publisher faces. It requires changing about the way your business is done, and it requires changing the culture of publishing houses. Some publishing houses are very well equipped to do this because they're already nimble, they're already flexible, but big houses are going to have a hard time with this. Medium-sized houses, I know of at least one who struggled with this quite a bit and has mostly managed to come out on the other side okay. But even those publishers who've made the transition to a pure digital workflow, to a new way of doing business, have to constantly evaluate what they're doing because the technology and the industry and the readers and the customers and whoever the customers are all changing constantly. So this is not a time to say, oh, we've done that digital thing, we're done with it, awesome. And a friend of mine, Owen Purcell from Ireland, says, yeah, I talked to a lot of publishers over here, and they think they've got this thing sorted. They've moved on. And I'm going, okay. It's interesting. And remember that publishing is already a digital business. Now, Now it's time to make an efficient, flexible, future-ready digital business. The time's come to stop creating these digital departments. I know it was kind of fun a while ago to have the digital VP, but digital is part of your everyday business. You are running two businesses simultaneously. I agree with Dominique Raca on that, but you're really seriously just running one business and transitioning to this new thing. Don't put the digital in a silo. Integrate digital into your everyday business. And the time has really come, and a lot of people have talked about this. Hugh McGuire actually said it far better than I ever would, so I'll just go short. Is make sure your books are saved in a format that can be exploited in new and different ways. This means to me that your book should be able to go from print to website with minimal rework. This means however you're saving your books, you should not have to reformat, you shouldn't have to change anything. Just move the book into whatever format you need that book to be moved into, or pieces of that book fast. And your workflow needs to allow you to work fast. As I mentioned, Byliner's not going to wait around for your catalog before they publish something. And are your systems and practices competitive? Maybe you can't compete on a royalty rate, but perhaps you can actually pay faster. Maybe you can't do this, but you can do that. But your competition is not going to play by the rules of traditional publishing. They don't know the rules of traditional publishing, and they don't want to learn the rules of traditional publishing. So the job of traditional publishing in particular is to create the rules and get ahead and be as competitive as possible. Finally, I mentioned the culture shift, and there is absolutely no way publishers can do this without extremely strong leadership. This kind of culture shift comes from the top, and it has to involve the entire company. We have to get past, and I stole this from Peter Collingridge a bit, we have to get back from the idea that this new way of doing something is getting in the way of the old way I did my job, to this new way of doing something is helping me do my job better. And that is a cultural thing, and that has to come from the top, but it has to permeate the entire company. It's going to be hard, but it's not going to get easier if you put it off till next year. It's really not going to be easier if you put it off a decade. It's got to happen now, because that's what the business is changing right now. Experiment, and we've seen a lot of examples of that already, but the best part of this new normal is that it presents an opportunity to break out of that's how we've always done it. In my former job, that we were actually banned from saying that phrase. We were never allowed to say those words in a meeting, because it didn't matter if that was how we always did it. We were doing it differently now. Okay, thanks. In my conversations with publishing people, I hear a lot of great ideas for what can be done, if only they had the freedom to do it. Okay, now's the time to do it. An experiment, it means moving beyond low prices. It means beyond giving away the first book in a series free. It means actually trying to do something differently. And the only thing I ask is that you serve the story, not the format. And that's really, don't just do something because you can. Do something because it makes sense for the work. We've seen the experiments that we've seen in the past year include the Elements, which went from a physical table, like an actual table, containing elements, to a book containing pictures of these elements, to an app. We've seen cookbooks that actually do shopping lists, which thank you publishers. And I haven't had time to explore Pottermore very much, but it's very much it's an example of taking your story world and building more, because that's what your readers want. Collaborate. Amazon, Apple, and Google, they're giants, and they're going to be around for a very long time. You can't pretend that they're not going to exist. But if you fear Goliath, work with David. And there are so many Davids in this room right now that you've got plenty of people to call on. You don't have to have all this expertise in-house. What you really want to have are people that you can trust to get the job done in a low-risk, low-cost sort of way. Startups say getting a meeting with a publisher isn't hard. Getting lots of meetings with publishers isn't hard. Having martinis with publishers is not hard. It's really easy, actually. You know what? But what's really, really hard for startups is getting a meeting with someone who can actually say the word yes. Publishers need to learn to say yes, and they need to say it often, especially if it's going to help them sell books. Finally, listen to consumers. And I am the last person to pretend that consumers are always right, But consumers are a good source of market information. They're telling you why they buy your books, why they read your books, what they're doing with your books. They're telling you what they're doing with technology. They're talking about what you're doing, even as you're announcing it. You have a press conference, consumers are talking about it already. And they serve as a quality control or early warning system. And I actually get to work this year's new drinking game phrase into my presentation. So Terry Pratchett released a book recently, riddled with errors. Steve Jobs' book was actually pulled from the iBookstore due to extreme errors. When an Apple fanboy is complaining about errors, you got a problem. Okay? And the Reamde incident referenced by James Bridle earlier this is a book, highly anticipated, high-priced book, riddled with errors. HarperCollins had to pull the book from the bookstore. They had to work overtime to fix the errors that should have been caught long before this book was released. Then they had to read it, we had to re-download it. Then HarperCollins, after the consumers had purchased the book, then they lowered the price of the book by $2. This is not the worst part of it. What happened during all of this is that 3 weeks prior to this incident, the book was accidentally released, and Neil Stephenson fans were purchasing the book from Amazon. And I'm looking at Pablo to see if he knew about this. Yeah, okay. So this book was released 3 weeks early. So 3 weeks before the official release date, people were returning the book to Amazon due to these formatting errors. Had the publisher been paying attention, these errors would never have created the public relations disaster that it created. Listen to consumers. They actually do have more to do than complain. So, change is the new normal, and it's going to be scary. It's going to bring opportunities, and it's going to be really interesting for a long time. So the key to success in that unpredictable world, be prepared to take advantage of whatever the future brings. I did it in time? Awesome.